Before I show you how to make this top, I just want to run you through basically how I figured out the sizing for this. I need you to keep in mind throughout this tutorial that I am by no means an expert in this knitting machine, nor am I an expert in anything to do with knitting. If you watched my previous Sentro machine, you'll totally understand what I mean. Like, I'm still kind of getting a grip on knitting gauges and how the machine works and different little things you can do to make it easier and all of that kind of stuff. The original top that I made that people asked for a tutorial on, I made that on a whim. I had an event on or something and I needed a top to wear, so I just whipped it up and I really didn't put any thought into it. I didn't take any notes on it. I'm kind of trying to recreate it, but I want to recreate it in a way that the quality is 10 times better, and also it is adjustable to other people, because just doing 2 full panels and sticking them together is giving one size fits all, and we are not about that. And also, it didn't even really fit me that well. For this top, I want it to be better fitting and less stretched out, and I want the design to kind of stay together rather than get stretched out as soon as I put the top on. So basically what I did yesterday was I did just one full panel, and then I took it off the machine and I kind of held it up against my body and stretched it out kind of where I want everything to sit, and I realized it was going to be way too stretched. So then I kind of had to think, and I was like, I probably need about 3 extra inches on either panel in order for it to fit me the way I want it to fit. So then I just placed my measuring tape onto the panel that I had and calculated how many stitches would be in 3 inches, and then I just added that onto a panel. So this is 44, well, it's a 48 hook machine, but it drops 4 stitches in the panel setting, so it's actually 44. So I needed about 54 stitches because I needed an extra 10 stitches. But then obviously this can't do 54, so I just took 54 and divided it by 2, which gives me 27. And then I've just been doing panels of 27. So instead of doing 2 panels, I'm doing 4 panels and I'm stitching them together. So basically I'm going to make 4 panels and stitch 2 panels together to make 2 big panels. Does that make sense? That's basically what I'm going to need you to do. I can't really give you a gauge. I'm still trying to learn how that works. Maybe do like a swatch of a full panel and just kind of hold it up against your body and manipulate it a little bit. See how it stretches across your bust. Even still, this stretches a little bit too much across my bust for me, but I'm not doing this again. I'm telling you that right now. I'm not doing it again. The other thing that I would recommend that you do instead of wasting your time is just find a Sentro knitting machine gauge tutorial and figure out your measurements from that before you go ahead and start on this, because I do not feel confident enough to give you a gauge and feel as though it would be helpful for you. So I don't want you to waste your time. I'm gonna show you now how to assemble this top and all that kind of fun stuff. With all of my Sentro projects, I always start and finish my panels with scrap yarn. It just makes everything a lot neater, and this is something that I learned pretty much as soon as I learned how to do anything with a Sentro. It means that you don't have to do all of that annoying cast off stuff. You can literally just cast off and then crochet your ends to remove the waste yarn. I personally find it to be a million times easier and more seamless, and it also looks better, but you can obviously cast on and off however you feel best. So I've just got some waste yarn here from the previous panels that I've done. Now it's important to know that, like I mentioned before, a Sentro knitting machine, when you are doing the panel setting, it drops 4 stitches if you're doing a full panel. If you're not doing a full panel and say you're stopping up here, it will still drop your first 2 stitches. Say you need, like me, you need 27 stitches, you would cast on up to 29 because it will drop your first 2 stitches over here. So then you will have 27 stitches, but you'll be at the stitch number 2 over from what you actually need. So I'm just going to cast on with my scrap yarn up to 29. And I always just hook it under the next needle as well, because this needle will basically then pull the yarn down and over this little hook right here, which is what your yarn needs to go under. And I'm just putting it through the medium tension, but I'm still going to hold my yarn just to give it a slightly bit tighter tension, but also just to have more control over the yarn. This hook number here is number 29. I need this yarn to go underneath this little hook right next to it, to the left of the hook. So the reason why I hook it into the needle next to it is because then this needle, as it goes down, will pull this yarn over this little hook and under, like that. And then I can wind backwards, and then number 30 will release the yarn that I have, but it will wrap around this hook again. So now I've cast it on up to 29. It will drop my 2 stitches up here, and that will give me 27 stitches. And your first round will always get caught like this. Just push the yarn down and over. I did kind of explain this more in my 3 Sentro tops video. Your yarn tends to get caught on the end stitches and it won't complete your stitches properly. It's important that you make sure that you push your loops all the way down over these hooks when you get to the ends, so that your yarn can be picked up properly in the next round. I'm gonna change over to my second color now. So I'm doing this combination of red and blue, but you can obviously do your panels all in one color. So just ignore when I change over colors again if you're not copying me exactly. But I'm gonna do 5 rows of this red and then the rest in blue. So all you need to do to change your yarn over, grab the tail of the yarn. I recommend having a way longer tail than this. Just gonna unhook it from this little slot here and place it down into the middle. And then you're gonna take the color that you're changing over to, put that through the slot and make sure that it's going down on this same side of this needle. So both tails are hanging down to the left of this needle. And then I'm just gonna put my red yarn through the medium tension slot. I like to hold it in the center like this so that it doesn't come loose or anything like that. And then you can just wind as normal. So I'm gonna do 5 rows of this. I've done my 5 rows, so now I'm going to cut a tail. I feel like this is about a good length, but you can always do longer, especially if you're a beginner and you just want that extra security. And I'm just going to place it down into the center again. And now I'm going to pick up my blue. By the way, the yarn that I'm using is just a medium weight 8-ply acrylic yarn. It's nothing special. And I reckon for this top you would need about 200 grams, depending on your size. So again, you just want to place your new tail into the slot and make sure it's on the same side of the hook. Place it into the medium tension slot, hold onto the tail, and then just wind as normal. So I'm going to be doing 100 rows, including the 5 rows of red that I just did. So 95 rows in blue and 5 rows in red. So now I know I've got 10 rows. I'm going to do another 5. Once I hit that 5 rows, I'm going to mark at my 10th row. Then I'm going to do another 10 rows and then I can keep going like that. The only reason I do that is because my 10th row right now is all the way up in here and it's so hard to mark it. So I like to do 5 extra rows on top of the 10 that I've done just to let the 10th row come out a little bit more so that it can then be marked. Don't know if that makes sense. Everybody has a different system for keeping track, but that's how I like to do it. Even though I always use stitch markers and I'm a fiend for stitch markers, for this I find it so much easier to use bobby pins. So I'm just going to count up 10 rows and I'm just going to mark that 10th row. And the reason that I do this is so that as I keep winding it, all I need to do is count the bobby pins and then I know in tens how many I've done. If you mark every 10 stitches, it will save you so much time. I'm just going to cast off now. So to do that, all you need to do is cut your yarn, throw this into the center, and then just wind it one way and then the opposite way. Just make sure it comes off this first hook here and it should just come off by itself. Before you can join any seams together, you need to remove this waste yarn here. So I'm just really quickly going to show you how to do that. I'm going to do a magic knot. Some people like to leave a really long tail here, but I like to just do a magic knot just to avoid there being really long tails everywhere. Now to remove this waste yarn, I'm going to use a 3.5mm hook. You can use any size you want. Obviously, if you use a bigger hook, you'll have a little bit more stretch in your stitches here. So it's totally up to you what you'd like to do. And you're basically going to find your first stitch. So for me, it's this one right here. So it's these little loops that are attaching to your waste yarn. So I'm going to insert my hook into that first stitch and pull up a loop, and then I'm going to chain 1 and do a single crochet into that same stitch. Then you can single crochet in every single one of these loops along. So just the first loop that you see that's attached to your waste yarn. And basically all this does is you're just replacing the loop that your waste yarn is attached to. In your final stitch, it'll probably look something like this. Just go in through the top of it like that and do your final single crochet. Then you'll just chain 1, cut the yarn and fasten it off. Now to remove this waste yarn all in one go, all you're going to do is find that final stitch in the waste yarn, which is this one here, and pull it loose. Cut that, and then on the opposite end you'll have your tail at the very base here. You just want to pull that until it comes out, and then you can just peel this off. And now you have a seamless end and none of your knitting stitches can come loose. Once you've removed all of your waste yarn, we can start stitching our panels together. So you're going to start off by stitching 2 panels together twice so that you have just 2 big front panels if that's the approach that you're doing. And make sure that the right sides are facing down, so the sides where you can clearly see the knit stitch should be facing each other. This side here should be facing outwards. You're just going to take some stitch markers or bobby pins, whatever you have, and you're just going to mark the first, I always mark the first single crochet of either side instead of the knit stitch, just because I find it easier to identify than a knit stitch. We're basically just going to be doing a slip stitch seam, so you just need to find the same stitch on either side. Literally all you need to do is just find the same hole. Along the back here you can see that's one, that's one, that's one, that's one. It's actually quite easy. Each squiggle line here is 1 row, so you just need to find the little holes in between those lines. So you're going to go into the very first row. So for me in the blue it is this one right here, just there. So I'm going to go in on one side and then I'm going to find the same stitch on the opposite side, which will be this one here. But if you get a little bit lost, just flip that panel over to the back so that you can kind of mirror exactly what it should look like on the opposite side if you have trouble finding it. So you'll have your hook through both. Then you're going to just grab your yarn, loop it onto your hook and pull it through both of those stitches. And then you're just going to basically do a chain. And then we're just going to do a slip stitch seam along the whole thing. So you're just going to go down into the next stitch, find the next stitch down the opposite side, pull it through both and do a slip stitch. Again, this is the next stitch down for me, and on the opposite side you can see that this is the next stitch down, so I'm just going to insert my hook in there and then do a slip stitch. And you're basically just going to keep doing that all the way down. And you can see on the back, once you're finished, it should kind of look like this. And on the front, when it's not stretched out, everything kind of blends together seamlessly. The seam should be kind of hard to see. It should also be straight because everything is in alignment. I've just stitched one side together just so that you can see what it's supposed to look like. But basically all you're going to do is a slip stitch seam along the edge here and also along the top here to bring the shoulders together and also your side. So this is the armhole just here. If you want to follow along with exactly what I'm doing and exactly the fit that I have based off of my sizing, I'll tell you exactly where I've marked my stitches, but I do recommend trying it on with a rough pinning so that you can make sure that your arms are definitely going to fit through and you're going to be able to manipulate the shoulders the way that you want to. We're going to do a slip stitch seam from the very first single crochet on either side up to the 5th single crochet on either side, and then on the side here where you're going to create your armhole, I've marked stitch number 35 down. So from the very top up here all the way down to stitch 35, which is where this stitch marker is here. So this will all be done in exactly the same way. Actually, all you need to do is find your first single crochet, insert your hook, find the first one on the opposite side, insert your hook, and reattach your yarn the way I showed you before. So just loop it over, pull through 2, and then just basically do a chain 1. And then for 4 more stitches, you're just going to do a slip stitch. So go in the next stitch, and then you're just going to chain 1 and fasten off. And that is my shoulder done. And then just for the side here, obviously we're going to do exactly the same step that we did for your middle seams here. So go ahead and do all of your joining and then come back here and I will show you how to do your duplicate stitching. All a duplicate stitch is exactly what it sounds like. You're just duplicating the shape of the stitch that's already there and basically planting a new color on top of it. Remember that your panel is basically one big grid and each stitch is one box on the grid. So it's just about looking for where that starting point is. So I know that this star chart is 68 stitches long and 48 stitches wide. I know that I should have 16 stitches at the base and 16 stitches at the top if I want the star to be centered. So all you need to do is find that very first stitch, and after that point it should be easy to locate where everything else needs to go. So for me, my 16th stitch is on the edge right here. You can bring it in further if you feel more comfortable doing that. It's just basically figuring out what you feel most comfortable with. To count your stitches, you just need to know what they look like. This here, where it's coming out from the center of the stitch above it and then looping down and under the following stitch. This here is 1 stitch, and you can see that it is just 1 loop. So it comes out of the top here, down and under the next stitch, out, and back in through the top. So that's one stitch. So that's all you're replicating. So find your first stitch first, and then you can get into your duplicate stitching. So down here, I've started doing the bottom of my star, and I'm just kind of going to show you what it looks like to do a duplicate stitch. So I know for my next row that I've got 5 stitches, starting with the stitch above this one. This stitch right here, where you can see the blue kind of wrapping around that red, that's going to be the stitch that I'm duplicating right now. All you need to do to duplicate a stitch is come out through the top of where that stitch starts. So here, and pull your yarn through there. And then again, you're just following where that stitch is going. So this stitch is going underneath the previous red stitch that I've done. So I'm going to push my needle underneath and pull it out like this. And then it needs to go back in through the top. And then I can see that the stitch next to it needs to be duplicated. So again, I'm going to come out the center here. I'm going to follow where that stitch is going. So underneath the stitch below it and back in through that center. So you can see that it's just about recreating that shape. You're basically just coloring in your knit panel with a different color. We're going to come out of the stitch next to it. And once you get more comfortable, instead of pulling it all the way through, you can bring the needle straight out into the next stitch. And say, for example, if I had a stitch on top here, I could insert my needle and bring it out the hole above it. And then I can duplicate that stitch. So it's just really about reading your chart and basically just following along, treating each stitch as its own box in the chart. I'm also just going to quickly show you what it would look like without having any of this framing around here. For me, I'm working the loops going down. If you're working the loops going up, then you would choose a different starting point. So for me, I need my loops to go down like this. You could always come out through the center and work through the top like this. It really just depends on where your starting point is for your stitch. Yours might look like that. Mine is like an upside down V. Yours might be facing up. It just depends on your starting point for your stitch. So my starting point, the loops are facing down. So that is why all of my stitches are facing that way. But yours might look like that, or it can look like this. So they can face either way, it doesn't really matter. It's just what's important is that you follow along with the grid and you maintain whichever way you started with the whole way across.